There we are.
Oh, that was not a clean cut. That was not a clean cut.
A second too early.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, and I go back to the intro. We try
Yeah,
it again.
let's see you in 2 minutes. Today we're a different format, Adrian.
Yes, and you will lead us through that format.
Yeah. I picked 4 topics. We were looking at our numbers a little bit, and our audience is maturing as it usually does in a growing channel, and that means that we're no longer talking to like the one audience. So we have
So
like a
Dennis believes
hardcore.
that you are now mature. You weren't before, but you are now mature.
No, I'm not talking about the channel. I'm talking about our audience. So
I mean the audience. So
so
you are now grown-ups, so we can speak differently to you now.
so we did some quick analysis, and it turns out that our core audience, which is very small, is interested in different things than our new audiences or fresh audiences, which are relatively large. Those that we're discovering in other channels. So we tried to mix it up a bit and have a little bit more of a newsworthy. So there's a bite-sized, a little bit of everything for everybody. So we're covering 4 topics today in like short 15-minute segments. The first one obviously being a little bit shorter since we're already 7 minutes in, and we can shorten it quite significantly. So the first one, so the 4 topics are a spec-driven versus test-driven discussion that surfaced on LinkedIn. The second one is about, let me pull up the list. The second one is about Matt Pocock's contributions lately. He seemed to have gone from TypeScript to AI usage, and he's one of the fastest growing, especially on social media and GitHub, fastest growing, let's say, tech influencer who's talking about old school fundamental skills plus AI rather than some crazy vibe coding stuff, which is refreshing to see. Third one is just general advice on pipeline usage and what we've been through, you and I, with regards to advising on updating people's continuous delivery flows to account for AI usage. And number 4, we can talk about in the outro is there was a, people call it a mini Shai-Hulud, but a supply chain attack is continuing, primarily targeting web packaged frameworks as an attack vector for token exfiltration and also for spreading the worm. And it made the news lately because it used Claude Code's settings as a attack vector, which was interesting to see. Well, or as a propagation vector, which was very interesting to see. So a little bit for everything. Let's start with the first one, which is the discussion between Sam Hatlam and Brian Finster, our dear friend Brian Finster, as a response to Alan Hollop's post on LinkedIn about specs and waterfall and sort of, are we supposed to do enormous plan MD files for Claude and will that make it smarter, or is that just waterfall in disguise? And yeah. Have you seen that post, Adrian? The one I'm referring to?
Do you want to show it to everyone, actually? So the question is,
I'm
will we
not
do that or
sure. I'm not sure. Like, it's very hard to follow. There's a bunch of comments. How about we do this? Because if I show it on screen, people won't know how to find it. So I'll drop it in the chat.
I think the interesting part would be if we would have the most important aspects of the posts and what the people have said somewhere visualized. I don't know if you could set up Excalibur real quick or something like that. Would be helpful, I think.
Okay. Excalibur, I like the Excalibur idea. So I did. I always have some scribbles. Okay, let's not have that one. Share screen, no audio. No, we don't want feedback loops. And Excalibur, awesome. And just let me know how it looks. Do we want this seen, or do we want our faces a little bit more active on screen?
Oh, just do the topic. I do the rest.
Okay, cool. Just let me get it on screen then. So Sam, so there was this post from Alan Holub, whom you're probably going to recognize as a, let's say, speaker, a very active speaker, especially 10, 15 years ago, about Agile. So he is very prominent in that circle, and his post was emphasizing this idea that, hey, if an AI makes a mistake, is it a prompt problem or a test problem, or should they fix it manually? Like, what is the correct workflow? Because there seems to be multiple ideas, and also the spec-driven community is sort of coming out of that space, and vibe coders are coming out of the space of, should you interact with the errors that the LLM is producing, or is every error just immediately supposed to be a reprompt, or are you supposed to reset and reprompt to target some like magical one-shot? How to optimize context windows, especially if you're vibe coding and you're burning tens of thousands of tokens. So his original post was about, hey guys, this is crazy. Like, if we're going to just talk in English without having hard written tests, then we're not really coding. Then we're not really making progress. And Sam Hodham, so Sam is a prominent figure in building spec-driven tools. So his most recent contribution to the space was creating a tool that also lends itself very well to event modeling. So that comes for this. It's a sort of alternative to Gherkin, let's say, so that instead of writing in Gherkin, that we write tests on a visual board. You might also recognize event modeling from Adam Dimitruk. And he came at it with this idea that, hey, no, tests are just an expression of the requirements, the spec, and it's really the spec that we should be iterating over and sort of closing the feedback loop on. And then I commented on this as well. It seemed to me that Alan and Sam agreed, and this spiraled into quite a heavy discussion with 65 comments. And there's other people, then also people who are heavy BDDers. I saw Paul Oldfield in the comments, Tim Ottinger. So everybody from the Agile space, continuous delivery space, Dora, extreme programming, everybody sort of chimed in the comments below. And it was a very heavy, very rich, richly discussed topic. So that's why it stood out to me. People obviously disagreeing, like there doesn't seem to be any sort of overarching idea that wins, but there were some interesting discussions here. Notably, Brian got triggered and then went into a really deep dive on what design is, what specs are, what tests are, what behaviors are. And if you're in this space and are sort of looking for or are trying to solve a similar dilemma on your own for AI usage, I recommend you go check out this thread. You can probably just follow Sam or Alan, and you'll notice the thread. It is still active after 3 weeks of Alan posting it. So yeah, I still get notifications of the thread that I started, where Brian and Sam are sort of arguing about semantics, about what is a spec, behavior is using Claude and agentic tools, or even automated tools that are running in a loop. Does that change what a spec is? Does the prompt ever become a spec? Does Claude's plan file become a spec? Things of that nature.
Many unanswered comments there. Yeah, but what I realize very often in these kind of conversations is that, so we don't really have standards. there are many people trying to push standards, but the standards are pushed in a different way, and that is since we have since we have AI in the space as well. I think that things even drifted more apart than they were before.
Yeah.
So it's not like so before we had, do we test? Do we not test? If we test, do we test like this or that? Right? That way. There was so there were the general TDD space with DDD, Gherkin, and all these kind of things, and there were the test last sometimes end-to-end test maybe fraction on the other side, which was the majority of people. And today, I can't even categorize it anymore.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like this, and I see this in this as well. Is how Brian posted with started with Martin Fowler link, right? It's like Martin Fowler is the industry standard link, put it in there, but
Has been for
has
2
been
decades, 3 decades, right? So
in his point of view, he is still.
yeah.
And I think that this is that is what I hit the cable. This is what we mostly see. This is what we mostly see now. Is that, as you said, more people are joining the stage and say that, oh, we have made good progress with AI, using AI, implementing AI. Practically, and this is what we found, and then people come together and say we have the same thing. This is how the entire conversation about context came into being. I was one of the people as well early on with the idea of context is important, and I came actually myself to the conclusion, though there was nothing I read about and suddenly I knew it. So it was a very natural way of, you need to make things reusable. That is what context is. And you need to make it reusable in between teams, in between members, in between sessions. And I think this is where people see the new standard, because there is suddenly an underlying layer missing since we use AI, which was there before. Before we had a manual session, we alone, we in pairs, we in mobs, using an IDE to implement things. That is how we have done it before. Now, suddenly, you have this AI layer where one person is doing much more, but somehow need to connect that with the team as well. Or again. And I think this layer is missing. So in reality, what I see in the last 2 years is that we have this new gap, this void, which is suddenly there, and people try to fill that one. So the real discussions about TDD, BDD, microservices are widely gone for me, so I don't see them anymore. They are probably still existing, and you will find people arguing still about
or they're sort of mixed into the AI landscape.
But they are not big standalone topics anymore. It's more like they are always intertwined into AI.
Yeah.
And I think that AI has reshaped the landscape of software engineering that fundamentally that we are longing for new standards out there.
And the social media space as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's very hard to even, not even the social media space, even the book space. People are now referring to books as, pre-AI and post-AI, because you can sort of, in the newer books from 2026, from 2025, you can every now and then spot a little bit of AI-generated text that was sort of not edited out correctly, which is a phenomenon that I've never noticed before, right? So that people refer to pre-AI books of how they felt different to read. And I can see the same thing with social media, where you might have a natural organic conversation, and then as it gets longer, people start summarizing their own replies or other people's replies and just using AI to, and I can tell that, oh, this sentence was written with AI because it was a summary of some point, and they just expedited it.
By the way, AI's influence is huge on society. Just a side note right now, quick one. This was this post of mine that people use too much terms like most people. Most people do this. Most people do that. That is something which is very, very new. We haven't used that terminology quite a while ago. And right now, since AI, or specifically OpenAI, is using that phrase basically everywhere. So
You mean
you
it amplifies it in organic discourse because it is
everywhere.
very
So you
common?
see in most people. So it starts with die meisten in Germany, or the most in English. Both languages, the very same thing. Most posts start with that these days, and comments as well. So what I want to say by that is, AI has done that and influenced that. Even though if we do it manually now,
It
we
is
think
recognized
same.
as AI speech. Yeah.
No, but we use it the same as well. So I saw people then in conversation start to using the phrase "most people" because they have seen that so often that it becomes a subconscious pattern. And that is how AI was learning from us. Now it's feeding back to us.
Yeah.
And that is something where I'm weary about. I don't like this, to be
Yeah.
honest.
It is a bit odd.
It is very odd. It is a
Going.
sign how less self-reflected we are. And the same thing is in the space with all the things. So why is TDD actually now a big topic? Is before AI it wasn't, right? And now it is, because suddenly you need something in order to get your the control back over of what you do in the tech space, and you don't want to be controlled by the AI. It's the very same topic, different angle. And I think that is the real challenge, is that we don't lose ourselves as companies and humans right now. And I think that two mentees asked me already about spec-driven development and if we should do that. And the point is, no one really understands the same thing behind spec-driven development. This is very interesting. So for everyone, is a little bit like, I do a spec and a little bit here, a little bit there. So it is not the same. There is no standard for it. It's like already now
And
a lot of opinions.
And because there is no standard for it, it allows for people to play around and build their own, or at least, whenever we lack a standard, people just publish random shit all over GitHub, all over YouTube, all over LinkedIn, and we are looking for traction. And that brings us to our second topic for today's episode, which is Matt Pocock. So Matt Pocock has really been a dominant coach and YouTube personality when it comes to TypeScript. And he was basically that TypeScript wizard. Like he could explain certain TypeScript concepts, certain concepts about typing, how to use TypeScript, how to write, the differences between solid code and not so solid code. And he has recently, I think a year ago-ish, he made a shift into AI, and he shifted from TypeScript to AI. And he, among other people, seems to be one of the most, let's say, growing, or the person gaining the most traction when it comes to AI advice, specifically how to code with AI, what kind of tools to use, what kind of skills to use. We have seen this in the past with people like Andrea Lafoggia, with Brian Finster's repository, but among everybody in the social media space, Matt seems to be growing the fastest, and which is surprising because his setup is quite simple, and I think that might be part of the recipe.
I think YouTube is part of the recipe,
or YouTube. Yes,
LinkedIn is not a place to grow.
Yes, and yes, you're right. You're right. It might just be the YouTube audience. But it's interesting. Or it might just be the age. Maybe the people on LinkedIn are our age and they have like 10, 20, 30 years of experience in the industry. And there's a lot of young ones on YouTube. But that's also not true, because looking at our YouTube statistics, and you at home who you're watching right now, most of our core audience is the same demographic as our LinkedIn audience, which is in their mid-30s, as their early or mid-30s, and 15 years plus experience. So anyway, the reason I pointed out, the reason Matt stands out to me is because he recently had quite a few workshops that have been streamed, that have been televised, where he runs through basically live coding with AIs. And most of it is actually BDD applied, like reasonable old school approaches. no reinventing the wheel, no crazy agentic loops. It is basically extreme programming, BDD, and he's using the AI tools to force him to explain himself, to think about the problem, to design the problem, and then there's also some coding, which was refreshing to see because that's how we used to and still do code the most effectively. And it positively surprised me that it isn't some crazy 1 million token, let's burn 7 agents in the background and just have it automated something overnight. So I was very glad to see not only that kind of advice, like very grounded advice, but also that that people were taking it seriously. At least looking at the audience numbers, it was one of the fastest growing one of the fastest growing GitHub repositories in the past few weeks. Yeah, I mean, not OpenClaw level speed, but reasonable. Yeah, that's all I wanted to mention for now. At Matt Pocock UK on YouTube. Matt Pocock is his GitHub account, so you can check it out. It has been quite popular with over 80k stars at time of recording and still growing. If they're botted, I'm sure there's some bots involved with boosting that star number, but there's also a lot of discussions there, so there's a lot of organic discussion happening about these topics. And his talks and his workshop recordings are of very high quality. And he loves live coding with AI tools, and he does touch on some design aspects, coding aspects, shortening feedback loops, continuous delivery concepts, which is the core topic of our show as well. So please go check out Matt Pocock and see if that helps you resolve any kind of dilemmas with regards to continuous delivery and AI.
But what I see with the skills, I see that very often that people right now do Git repositories with the skills, and people think, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can use the skills of someone else." Every time I see that as a heavy user myself, I think that is an immature approach. You shouldn't really load them into your repository and use them there. You should take a look at them and take the learnings from them and put that into your own stuff. That is what actually would work. It would make sense because they are heavily contextualized to what you do. So we have 2 big projects which brings basically the money in for a company, and both are totally different how they work. The skills are different, context is different,
Yep.
this infrastructure is different, even though both are based on the very same actual JavaScript frameworks. Still, the context and the way of working is totally different. And I wouldn't reuse anything. We don't even reuse skills between front-end and back-end. And this is what I would see as a maturity thing, to don't use those Git repositories as the new Stack Overflow for fixing Claude problems. So if you cannot write skills for Claude, you can't use Claude. That's my personal opinion.
And if you can't write skills with Claude, just ask Claude how to write skills, because it will gladly teach you.
Yeah, just give a little bit of insight command in Claude. It will tell you how you prompt, how often you fail, how often it basically fails files, or how often you make mistakes. You should understand your tools. This is the reason why I dislike when people say, "Oh, today I use Codex, tomorrow Claude, and then I go for Copilot." I test them all. If you test them all, you're actually not productive at all. That is what I can say about that. Because if you have a real production constraint, you need to take the best thing which is on the market and try to become very good at it. And if there is another thing like Codex coming up, maybe it can become, but stay with the one tool which is proven already and become good at it. And then you can make, let's say, set up another hypothesis with another tool, but you always need to have your primary tool. That's one of the reasons I don't go away from IDEs. I already know I don't test out 3 new IDEs because it's funny, because I become unproductive in no time.
There's too much, screwing around and testing all the possible tools. And also, there's new tools being built every day. You know, we saw the advent of Ralph and then OpenClaw, and then that got pulled basically or replaced with more native tools. And then now we see the advent of Pi. So Pi is supposed to be sort of a low token bootstrap coding context. And there are also similar tools like Odin, which is supposed to sort of be this sort of multimodal agentic harness. And then there
I don't understand multimodal at all. When that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. This is not even like Sonnet and Opus right now on Cloud. There is no reason to switch to Opus right now. Sonnet is solid and very good, and it's cheaper. So you can use it for basically everything you do. So you can use Opus as well. But if you think that, hey, we need to go with every new model out there, the only thing you have done is fall prone to the advertisement of the AI companies, because we are not in the space anymore where there's a significant change from GPT-1 to 3 to 5 or something like that. Those steps aren't that big anymore. It is more like token usage, deep thinking. But I'm very slow in things. For example, we are still on Next.js 14. We haven't updated. We don't do updates every year because people, the conferences, the news media, everyone. Let's take a look at Theo or something like that. He is promoting every new model. Like, what the hell? So you can't even learn to use a model well if you are switching every day a model, because they behave differently. That is what you need to understand. And if you are happy to move every day, I assume you are not productive, because if you are productive, your constraint is to have at least some determinism. So you need to have progress and determinism, otherwise, especially as a team. So if everyone in the team would use randomly what they want, you would destroy your company in 1 month. Not the company, but the tech base, actually. And
So-
you can't simply use that this way. Today, my business partner said to me that our code base grew in the last years that much that we need to take more care of what we actually do there. So that is one of the. It's not heavily related to AI right now, but actually that AI helps us doing that, but only to some degree. So you need humans, you need systems, and you need underlying architectures and infrastructures you constantly work on. So refactoring became much more important with AI than before. It was before already important. Take a look at what Brian Finster and Dave said about how often or how much high performance actually a refactor. Like in 1 year, they refactor more than 60% of the code base. I agree. We do the same thing with us, but with AI, you need to do this, because the problem is.
But it's important to point out that it's not refactoring for refactoring's sake. It's actually going back and remodeling things with newer understanding.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like you need to clean up the foundation, so in order that you can put more on it, because if you don't do that, on some point in time you have an inverted pyramid. You need to have a clear pyramid, otherwise you always need to make sure that actually this is how I view refactoring. So right now we have made a big change to one of the apps we built for a German company, and today was an update day. This morning it was a long night, and there was a lot of feedback coming in. A lot of users used the user experience was totally different than before, and they asked so many, especially the older generations, asked us why we needed to make those changes, and we basically told everyone that we made those changes because we had too many user groups, had too many ways of using the apps. And we needed to start to consolidate, because the complexity just to make everyone happy became too large. So we needed to start consolidate and the code base. So it was the user experience reflected in the code base. Code base became too complex, and the the chance to run into bugs and problems was too high. So we needed to reduce that and get back into control. That is why we basically removed a lot instead of added. It looked differently, so it looked like we built everything new, which wasn't the case. That was what I see as healthy refactoring as well, because that was a business decision to make a stable business out of that. And with AI, especially when you have more people generating more, planning more, reviewing more, doing more, right? You will have more. And you have more, you need to refactor more. That is a simple equation. You can't just do less refactoring while you do more creation, then you have a problem.
That brings us into the third topic, which is generally continuous delivery advice when it comes to AI coding or coding in 2026.
And we have comments, by the way.
We have comments. Okay.
Adrian.
Okay. I don't. Where?
Substack.
Okay. Okay. I see. Thank you. Let me.
I put that into the actual comments.
Yeah. So, Adrian, hey, the idea behind Pi is great, or common sense actually, and the recent interview with Mario Zechner are very useful. Yes, it's Mario Zechner's interview that I've seen about Pi. And I wasn't reading an interview. I think what I watched was a Mario Zechner talk on a conference somewhere here in Europe. It was a recent video. So for those who aren't following, Pi is meant to be the sort of lean harness for agentic usage. Now, whether they're multimodal or not, that doesn't matter. But the idea is that it allows you to start talking to any model without wasting a lot of its boot time token space on nonsense like pre-prompts, context prompts, system prompts, skill prompts, etc. One of their use cases that they're presenting on conferences, or at least that Mario presented, was this idea of, how many tokens do you waste just by booting up an empty context, an empty conversation? Like how much of the token space was already influenced, touched by system prompts, etc. So following up on that topic of agentic coding, our third topic for today is continuous delivery advice when it comes to AI. People ask me, and from what I heard, Adrian, this seems to be happening to you as well. People keep coming to me for advice on, hey, should I use AI like this? We're doing trunk-based development. Should I use AI like this? Is this lean? Is this good practice? Am I just vibe coding? What would you recommend? And I noticed I started giving similar recommendations. So I noticed that my recommendations started becoming context-free, where suddenly there's multiple groups that are in different companies that are benefiting from the same advice. And one of the points I keep mentioning is that coding is very likely the least benefit right now you can get from AI. It is so powerful in communication and analysis that if you're just using it to help you code, I think there's a lot of sort of untapped potential left. So I always mention these examples of summarizing conversations, converting whiteboard drawings to text, codifying text into drawn analysis. If you're analyzing usage patterns across SQL queries, it can very quickly build up an HTML page where it visualizes it. It is very, very useful for taking coverage reports or test output reports from multiple tools and visualizing them in a way that might help you triage an issue or help write a postmortem in a way that sort of brings you the data. Like it is very good for building ad hoc dashboards or ad hoc workspaces for analyzing a problem, right? So to bring you data before you make a decision. But code and output that is throwaway, that isn't going to make it into your main code base. And this can also include, now with the latest features from Claude, and this is fresh from the press, which is the new /goal command, and also the /loop command, and the
send help command.
The what?
You can tell Claude to send support.
Really?
You will send more agents to tackle the problem.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that one. But so there have been more workflows. Like, so one of my teams is experimenting with Odin, where we've started replacing, and this example I mentioned the most is we started using more of AI aware systems internally in a lot of our teams, especially when it comes to logging. When there's like a logger of some kind, and it might be a structured log or a JSON or just English text of this happened, and then there's additional context in the log, like info messages, error messages, warn messages, traditional old school logging. We started deviating away from that, and we started optimizing more for whatever we put into a logger. We will 90% of the time we will pass through Claude first. So we started optimizing logs for AI usage first. So we structured it in such a way that our Claude bots and our Claude context will pick it up more easily, because we won't read it. We will always analyze it through Claude first and have it summarized, which is very organic and even unprompted. A lot of the teams that I'm coaching have started doing that organically, where they just assume that low key and just Logstash records won't be eyeballed, but they will be ran through some kind of LLM, if nothing else, to filter out and then eyeball a cherry-picked part of the log, or just completely have it summarized by an AI, which is fascinating. And also, I've been recommending Matt Pocock's sort of grill me workflow, not the skill itself, but sort of this idea of, hey, even if you're pair programming, have the AI go into interview mode and just have it grill you on, hey, there's this problem we're solving. Let's create a mutual understanding. And it'll just keep asking you questions. And then that, I found, is also a very organic way to have like an automated facilitator when we're pair programming, or where there's an engineer or a backend and front-end person, or a full stack engineer with a domain expert, or maybe a data engineer or a data scientist talking to a software engineer, so that the two of them can organically talk while there's a bot recording the conversation, so the audio, transcribing it, and following up with more questions. So it is sort of creating this sort of automated agenda for creating context about how to solve a problem, and then turn it into zombies analysis, turn it into tests, turn it into tickets, write a Slack message, push it to the code base, or push it to linear or any kind of task management tool, which I found very refreshing. I found these like productivity hacks to be very welcome and very sort of new age, I would say. Like, people just organically pick this up, and it's like, yeah, this is fun. It sort of almost gives working in software and communication and talking about problems and sharing the decision-making load almost this sort of this sweet gamification layer that is enabled by these LLMs. What advice are you sort of involved with when it comes to the process, continuous delivery? Does anything stand out, Adrian?
Mostly, there's this idea of automation. And I think that automation is a bad word in AI, because it assumes that something happens automatically. And I think that we are not there right now.
That's like hard automation rather than an LLM running.
Yeah, it's what needs to be, that there needs to be connections. I still haven't developed a language to actually explain
like
that.
Grounding it in hard tools rather than
let's say
Inference.
if you want to do continuous delivery, which is one progress, so you don't have branches, you have one progress. We have one team of 5 developers working towards one goal, towards one trunk, towards one deployment. So you need to streamline everything else around that as well. So you use one way of using Claude with the variations of the context you are working in. But everyone else knows this. So you don't have anything personal. As soon as you start having personal things, you have a problem. And I'm a very personal person because I think it's good to work on yourself like this. But in working as a team, it's a different story.
Yeah.
If you want to work as a team and you want to use something with as AI, which is not a deterministic software solution, AI is a non-conscious intelligence which you can command as an individual, not as a team. And that is I think that's the interesting point here. So you have individuals who work together as a team with their personal implementations of intelligence they use again. So they need to make sure that all the intelligences are basically working with the same underlying data, with the same underlying ideas, context, works, skills, however you want to call it. And I think the most important skill you develop as a human being is not to type code yourself anymore. It is not to plan yourself anymore. It is not to review yourself anymore. It is to orchestrate everything around you in a way that you make sure that it is that is well connected with the overarching vision, mission, and the other teammates. So because that, and we often forget this, continuous delivery was very hard to implement for many teams before because they lacked exactly those 3 things. So with AI now, you amplify because if you don't do that, you isolate yourself faster than you can take a look at it. And this is where I see the biggest issues right now.
And I see this a lot in teams where they just use Claude Code and similar tools for coding, and then they get buried by either having way too much human review, or they just don't review and they just ship it to production.
Yeah.
And the advice and people keep asking me, like, how do we solve the review problem? And my answer is, well, don't create it in the first place, or like don't let it one shot so much. Just stay in the loop. Like, don't have it code on its own for 3 minutes and then you have to review 200 lines of code. Have it code, qualify the problem in such a way that the problem can be solved in 1 or 2 open files, and that it won't produce more than 10 lines of changes.
I wouldn't even call it code anymore because, coding is what definitely happened is that coding is now one layer further away from you than before. And code before was like you needed to spend a good portion of your day into thinking about code quality in a way while you are writing it. That is, you don't really do that in that case anymore. You are more in the review part, which requires you to understand about these things, to read and to be able to follow it, but not necessarily to write it yourself anymore. Not to that degree. And I don't think it's even a reserve skills because I use it so rarely. So yeah, if AI would now be cut off in Europe, I would probably find I could work on, but it would be much slower. But what I want to say is that there is context of a specific feature set you're working on. There is a specific problem case, there's a specific issue or something you want to achieve. And as long as you haven't understood it fully, and with AI, especially Claude Code, if you have a good unified monocode base, you can easily do that, especially with additional context files. And if before you don't 100% know what the problem is and having it basically as a contract in between you and the AI, you can't do anything anyway. So which means that you need to have this planning mode contract where you see that the AI has fully understand what this topic is about, what the context is about, where is it right now, why is it there, and what we want to achieve. Not just change code line X, Y to Z because I'm too lazy to type. This is not what you need to do. You can write yourself. It doesn't
So-
make a big of a difference if you just need to fix a line, but you need to understand why you fix this line.
Mhm.
Right? And this was a skill beforehand as well, which we were selling a very mature senior principal staff engineer skill, something like that. No, it's actually not. It's actually standard engineering skill, but it wasn't big thing back then. Right now, without it, you cannot be very effective as a team if the people don't have that.
And people keep bringing up this idea that I see three sort of measurements come up when it comes to AI adoption, which is how much tokens they're spending, what percentage of their new code is AI assisted, and how much faster they're going with AI assistance. And I keep seeing this sort of as a categorical error of we're not really when we're talking about introducing AI assisted coding into the SDLC or into the continuous delivery pipeline, we're not really talking about speed. What we're emphasizing automation and orchestration. We just want to not have to touch the keyboard ourselves because the AI tool is very good at that. But ultimately, what you're sort of accelerating is the rate at which you, the human, go from one decision to the next decision. And that can still happen. Like, ideally, that happens every few seconds where I make a decision and broop, and I make another decision and broop, and I make another decision and broop, and I make another decision and broop. That seems healthy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then we scale this. We introduce multiple people, and then the communication channels become a little bit strained, and then we have AI tools also assist with that. That seems healthy to me. The unhealthy part that people, I think maybe it's just that sort of naivety trap or a sort of diffusion of understanding of what we're really doing, or people are just annoyed by coding themselves and they surrender under that sort of managerial pressure of code faster, please. And what I see people trying to do, especially with this sort of misunderstood BDD, TDD, and sort of spec-driven spaces of discussion, is let's try to figure out all the decisions I will make in advance, and then I give all of my future decisions to the AI, and then it will produce something for 3 hours, and I will go do something else. And they're trying to get the speed of the AI will do something, and then the AI doing something without me allows me to do something else. And it is sort of going from 1x to 2x, maybe, and then we have to review. And this sort of, I want some part of me to be automated so that then I can do something else. This sort of multitasking seems to be sort of that AI vibe coding craze, or also just this sort of like weird, very naive way of introducing AI into the pipeline or into the workflow, into your process. And the people I see having more success are those that are using it and are not stepping away from the computer, who are basically using it as a frequent, very chatty tool rather than as a fire and forget agent, with the exception now of cron jobs, where I saw a staff engineer set up a really nifty setup with their Claude, which is they have those logs that I mentioned earlier that are sort of streaming stuff that are Claude compatible from production. And he has a prompt that basically checks the logs every hour or every 2 hours while he's working to just check the logs of his recent deploys and come and interrupt him if there's something of an anomaly, which is really interesting. That I find very reasonable because it enriches the rate and the signal density of you getting feedback from your production system, because you might just have deployed something and then you run that and then it sort of checks the logs every now and then so that you don't have to do it. You don't have to interrupt yourself. It'll check, and if it'll only interrupt you if it finds something, which is very practical, which is very, very information rich, and a workflow that was not possible. It was not possible without interruption a year ago. Well, 6 months ago, even. Yeah, I think we can close that topic here.
Mhm.
The last topic for the outro is AppSec. So there is another round of the Shai-Hulud worm going around. So for those of you who don't know, Shai-Hulud originally was this worm that had a very advanced attack vector. So it got into your system through multiple means, usually a already infected npm package. And then it tried to spread to your computer through either npm, pnpm, or bun pre-install, post-install, pre-update hooks. So it started spreading to your system and rerun itself on these like benign looking activities. The most recent attack attaches itself to your Claude settings JSON, either in your project or in your global user directory, where it basically registers a benign looking pre-prompt or post-tool usage hook that will either exfiltrate data or run a binary on your machine, which includes malicious code. So the reason this worm is so, let's say, is making the news and making the rounds right now is because it is very it's very durable. Like it's hard to remove from a system because it is also spreading through when it infects your system. What it'll do, it'll hijack. If you have any npm packages, it'll hijack it, or if you have any PyPy packages, it'll hijack it, and it'll publish a new minor version of any package that you own with the infected attack vector. So anybody who is running bleeding edge versions and is not, so doesn't have any form of AppSec or sandboxing in their pipeline, they will install the infected package before you can react and pull it, and it'll spread through other systems. So this has been one of the fastest spreading attacks that is doing token exfiltration, and then it'll do random stuff on your computer. It'll try to pick up metadata from your AWS account. It'll look for tokens. It'll look for API keys for AI, for example, or GitHub tokens, or GitHub workflow tokens that allow itself to infiltrate your npm issues or your your GitHub Actions issues or your GitHub Actions runs, and then maybe inject code into a new workflow, allow itself to spread to every machine in your organization through GitHub workflow injection. So it's quite nasty and it's quite sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
It made the news yesterday because it has made its way into the computers of the maintainers of TanStack and Mistral packages of Mistral AI, and that those are very popular, very widely available packages, which just allows the bot to spread itself faster. Adrian, what do you do to protect yourself from stuff like this?
I'm just checking if I'm. No joke. Give me a second, please.
We are looking at the website Safe Dev Team. They recently published it on their blog post. So it's usually AppSec vendors that are specialized in security or sort of supply chain security, where you basically have a vendor that either provides you hardened packages or has a tool in your CI/CD pipeline that inspects or sandboxes installations of newly updated packages. And the general recommended way of handling situations like this is to sandbox all the packages, install them once, and once it's confirmed that they are safe, you hard lock you maintain a local repository or an organization-wide repository where you know which packages of all of your package managers, which version is safe for you, for your use case. And then you don't update beyond that until it is proven that the next version is safe as well.
Yeah,
obviously that's super expensive.
You should have an update management anyway. So just having everything on auto increment is not the best.
Yeah, it's quite naive nowadays, especially with the rate at which new attack vectors are being implemented.
That and code quality as well. So you can suddenly have bugs in production and you don't know why. And
Claude can just update a package and you can miss it. And
that can you can even have NPM updating it for you because, just remove the little cap in front of the version number. That's the first thing you should do, and just do it manually, and have something like Dependabot running where you take a look at current CVEs, get a message, and build it in your pipeline that the GitHub action is not allowed to pass if it's too high.
Dependabot is but you need to keep in mind that Dependabot should be the last line of defense, because Dependabot basically only flags.
But you should have a last line of defense. This is what I say by that.
Okay, fair. But Dependabot is already too late, right? Because it'll tell you if you've installed a malicious package and are about to roll it out to production. But a lot of these attacks,
in this case, yes, it is on your personal.
A lot of these attacks are actually attacking not production servers. So not the deployment artifacts, but actually the dev machines or the CI/CD pipeline. So Shai-Hulud, for example, or in this case, mini Shai-Hulud, it can already do damage if it appears on a feature branch as a test update of, you update it on a branch and you don't merge it to main and you don't deploy it to production. From there, and it runs in your CI/CD pipeline on the branch, there it can already wreak havoc because it can steal and infect people who are working on that branch, those people's machines, any kind of reused unhardened Docker layers, Docker images that are produced as a result. If people are logging in on into some kind of staging environment, that can be used as an attack vector. So don't think that just because we didn't merge it to main and didn't deploy it to production that you aren't exposed to supply chain attacks. The modern supply chain attacks are, for the most part, targeting dev machines and CI/CD pipelines, where they can already exfiltrate token keys. Because a lot of you, I'm sure, use either some kind of OpenAI key or some kind of local workflow key or some kind of non-IP address or non-whitelisted token where you have some kind of internal API server that does some diagnostic, or you have some kind of freaking local, a whole nest of local MCP servers, and those might be in your environment variables in these CI/CD pipelines. And if you have installed a malicious package through this kind of infection, even in a non-production branch, that information can already be exfiltrated if these systems aren't sandbox in the sense that they don't have access to the internet. So if you are running CI/CD runs in some kind of GitHub Actions workflow, for example, and those runs have access to the internet, or you don't heavily control what they have access to, then you can very easily, run into these kind of issues, even if you have a security gate for production, but not for running your CI/CD pipeline. A previous version of the Shai-Hulud attack was using a very sophisticated attack where it was actually using the GitHub CLI client to trigger a GitHub CLI workflow and execute code on a currently logged in dev's machine where they have registered for their account that GitHub Actions is allowed to update GitHub Actions, the CLI client, locally on your machine. and it would attach itself to like a post-install hook through the package, and then embed itself in the post-install of your package managers, and then propagate itself to that system. And you could have a zero button, like a zero access attack vector, where somebody just infecting the pipeline could infect your machine without you being complicit, without you actively being involved in the attack. That was a while back. That was a 0-day last year, I believe, in September. But these things are getting quite sophisticated, and like it is beyond my ability to keep up. So prevention goes a long way. Or once you know about it, do the recommended check that Adrian just did and check if your system.
No, it was a joke. We don't use the packages they issue, but of course you should always be aware of anything you do, right? So check everything you install, be aware of what you do. So that is the typical tech when you're not be aware of these kind of things. But if you understand, if you see a change to your package JSON while you're just doing bug fixes in your code, then be aware of something. You shouldn't push that, or take a look what actually happens and why. So if you aren't aware of that, well, no one can really help you, because there will always be something which you might oversee. So become an aware person. That's what I can say in this moment.
Also, your API keys for something like Claude can be basically a read access vector to your production databases, because people nowadays don't shy away from connecting Claude to their Loki or PG Analyze, or even a read replica of your production database to do analysis. And I've seen a lot of devs sort of optimize token usage or token spend, where they have their own account, and then once they reach the limit, they ask for somebody else's API key. Or
it's absolute horror for me to get to the production databases right now. And so it's basically not mounted on my computer anywhere. So if I need to do it manually. But this is normally done by the people who are actually working with the database. And even they have a lot of hurdles, a lot of skips to make in order to actually get to the data. It wasn't that like that in the past, and we had issues with that in the past. We had issues with people getting into our system, right? So it was, I don't know, 12 years ago, something like that, in another company. But we don't exactly know how, but we did know that we weren't taking every measure we could, right?
And you shouldn't have manual access to your database server.
It's actually easy. It is fairly easy to prevent the absolute vast majority of things, especially when you're a small company.
But it comes at a huge cost of accessibility. Like you then have to go through, portals or similar tools or tunnels or double sign off, or at least, in Europe you have to anyway for secure systems. For compliance reasons, but you then basically trade a lot of accessibility. Like you can't just have access to any server, you can't have access to any database, you can't have access to any API, you can't have access to any MCP. But then, we do that for the humans, but then Claude has access to everything, and it's like, oh, hang on, that's still the same problem.
Why does Claude have actually access to everything? That is a question you need to ask for yourself. So if it's for convenience reason, because you need once in a while a file which you need to give to Claude, then take the file, make it available inside the project, don't commit it and delete it afterward, fine. Then, just make sure it doesn't have access to outside of this root. And it basically can do it. By default, it doesn't do it. It even says, I won't do it. So it's already a mature tool. So use it in a mature way as well.
Yes, if you risk exposing something. But obviously, if your system is compromised, then, or if your keys were compromised, then there's no telling what somebody from the outside could be doing. They might be logged into your Claude right now and you don't even know it, and they might have access to, through the web console, they might have access to the Claude accessing stuff from your servers that you can't control and you can't even observe. So you got to be careful. You got to harden this. Like prevention is very important.
Don't have AI on production servers at all, so I don't know.
I
I don't
think
even have a scenario for this.
for convenience reasons, I mean, you might not have it on production servers, but you might have it on production copies of your replicas. It might be looking at your linear boards or your project management boards, and those project management boards have log dumps from your production servers or keys from your production servers. Not keys, but access mechanisms, release plans, etc. That might be enough to exfiltrate enough information to cause damage, even if it's just for social engineering as a secondary attack vector. So this is new. This is, it's gonna get worse, and a lot of tools that are being used for cyber attack defense are also being used for cyber attack offense. So this is just, the playing field just got a little bit more complicated, and there's definitely going to be a lot of evolution in the next decades to adapt, or at least to catch up with people who are general users versus people who are AppSec experts or white black hat hackers. A new comment from Adrian, and then we can wrap. We're using an internal LLM gateway, which is accessible only within the organization, and the tokens are only for its usage. That's what I meant, is that we're using an internal LLM gateway. That kind of system can still be compromised with something like this mini Shai-Hulud. If it gets access to your pipeline or your dev machine, and it starts talking from within your organization with these pipelines without a human in the loop, and start exfiltrating data. Because all it needs to do is just get access to one of your nodes, right? And if any node in your system can just get access, even though it's localized, it can still get a lot of information onto your local node, which is within your private network, and then it can just exfiltrate it through Cloudflare or through a domain, a public domain that you have whitelisted, which is usually OpenAI, Cloudflare, etc. Or Vercel or something similar, or NPM. But it's very easy to set up whitelisted domain names under these top level under these domains through any kind of cloud hosted agent usage, which this attack that we've been talking about has also done. They're using then these different kinds of cloud vendors to serve as C2 servers for exfiltration, but the actual data access happens within your trusted network, possibly even on a trusted dev machine. So it's complicated. Yes, that is a good measure, but sadly not enough, as we see from these attacks. So it's worth to stay paranoid rather than say, oh, we have this thing where we have, I don't know, a common solution that I see is having portal for or telescope for access, and then timescale. Sorry, not timescale. God damn it. What's the internal VPN for companies? The name escapes me. Help me out. What's the tunneling technology that most companies use for
a VPN?
Yes, the VPN. It's a specific vendor. The name escapes me.
NordVPN,
OpenVPN.
No.
It's a business. It's an internal layered.
I don't know.
Okay. The name escapes me, but most organizations that I see, a common solution is using a VPN of some kind, or a cloud vendor for a VPN, and then some kind of password manager that is shared organization-wide, and enforced pipeline runs or API keys that are hidden through that password manager, through that tunnel, through that VPN. But you can still get attacked even though you have such a system, because this setup only protects you from foreign actors, people who are sniffing you on a public Wi-Fi, or people who are doing man-in-the-middle attacks on your network traffic or on your browser activity. But these supply chain attacks are really nasty. They hit you from inside. So a lot of organizations don't think about hardening the inside layer so that a node inside your organization cannot have access to sensitive information on another node inside your organization. For example, somebody getting access to your project management files or your customer files or your internal memos where you're discussing sensitive topics, which I'm sure a lot of people have given Claude or Gemini access to. And not everybody's using the hardened enterprise packages either. There might be moonlighting, or they might be mixing, having an enterprise key, but then some people also bring their own keys, and it's very complicated. Gotta be careful, guys.
Bring your own device to a highly secure environment.
Well, we can discuss that next time. That's it for today. So just to recap, we've covered spec-driven versus tests and that discussion between Alan Holub and Sam Hutton and Brian Finster. We discussed Matt Pocock's sort of pre-noir and sort of entry into the AI space and his skills. We've discussed our research and experience with, let's say, bleeding edge adoption of AI usage in continuous delivery, and especially teams that are working drug-based. And now discussing the latest supply chain attack, which is also using Claude as a attack vector and a propagation tool. So that's it from us for today. I hope we'll see you again next Wednesday for a similar episode or something a little bit more on topic. We'll have to discuss that with Adrian still.
I need to still deploy and set it up for OTJ that you can subscribe to our events and you get notified. That's a missing feature right now, at least for the stream. I have it ready, but I need to set it up. Maybe I do it over the long weekend. We have a long weekend here, and probably doing that there. So next week we can already start with doing that, because there are several people interested, but no one actually know when we do something, and we need to change something about that. That's important.
Yeah, the platform stability has been an ongoing target for us to hit. We've been sort of swapping back and forth in LinkedIn being our primary platform to Substack being our primary platform. Now it's going back again to YouTube being our primary platform. LinkedIn and Substack have been evolving their technology stack and their feature set, and sometimes it's one step forward, sometimes it's two steps back. So the more they're evolving, the more YouTube seems to be the obvious stable choice.
YouTube is the place where it is made for videos, right? And it is a very good and healthy mix of video. It's very tech friendly. So if you post a video about AI, it goes up.
Yes, it's very tech friendly, but it's also the platform where we're least likely to reach our core audience last minute. It's purely algo driven, right? So that this whole idea of subscribing and
YouTube would be if we would not do video on demand as a primary source, but having normal videos as well, which we don't.
I'm subscribed to like 600 channels, so what do I know? Like when somebody goes live, right? Like, and I think this is
actually we don't know. So it's a little bit like if you have a very favorite streamer, then the streamer goes online every day but this is actually a Twitch behavior which they have adopted to YouTube.
And we have some of those, like some of our audience does behave like that, but sadly it's only 3 to 5% of
we've tried that. It basically doesn't work at all for us. No one comes. It's basically
when we target those people, the shows are too narrow. So we do have to mix it up a little bit with capturing a wider audience or a fresher audience or non-regulars. But if we then only cater to them, then it gets boring because we keep repeating the same thing. So we got to mix it up a bit. Hope this format was fun for you. Adrian, especially on Substack, thank you so much for commenting and being here with us live and staying for the entire session. I do appreciate that. All right.
We need to point that out.
A lot of people here come in, they show up, they watch for 2 minutes, and then they leave. And that is that typical YouTube and LinkedIn behavior. But for whatever reason, the Substack folks are staying longer on. Okay. Anyway, that's another conversation. Thanks so much.
Likewise.
See you next